how do you know like where to start with an athlete? Like, do we just give them X amount of grams per kg, or is there the magic peaking numbers? Or what day do you start the peak week on? Like, where do you establish the baseline for a given competitor, and how do you know where to adjust from?
Yeah, since we started using the multiple day refeeds a little bit more commonly, that's what they ended up being, kind of a crystal ball, so that we have some information to base things out of. I think in the past, prior to that, um, a lot of what we did was just what kind of made sense based off their, usual carb intake, the size of the athlete. Whereas with, 2 to 3 consecutive days of eating at maintenance, which is not uncommon for a lot of our athletes, you get a good idea of what happens, and they're able to relay information to you. And you can see how that even changes over time, where, maybe if they had 3 consecutive refeeds at first, by the time they got to the third day, they started to maybe like really fade away a little bit, like they were overcarbed. And you might find that like later on, it's gotten to the point where it's like, shoot, now they're so depleted that if anything, it might not seem like it's enough, and you might have to tack on like a fourth highish day. So a lot of the clues are there, and I think this really helps the athlete get it, that or be able to comprehend that, we're not changing a whole lot. You're not entering into the unknown. We've kind of done this the whole way, and we're going to kind of just try to repeat what's been most recently happening. So I think that's really gone a long way in helping like me as a coach with the anxiety that comes with a peak week, and most importantly, the athlete. As we discussed, it can, an anxious athlete can like totally change the way they look and how they respond and how predictable they are. So yeah, the clues are there the whole way, and it's important that we use them, and it's important that we really teach the athlete to relay what they are seeing, because quite often, like, that is what we're going to count on, like on that peak week, is like your athlete being able to really communicate with you, like what is going on, like right now. How do things feel? Where do you think it's going? Like with my more experienced athletes, I love the fact that I have the luxury to ask them, okay, what do you think we should do? What do you think is going to happen? But yeah, it helps now that, in the past, like we had like the practices, the peak weeks were like either we got there early and we got to practice a few peak weeks, but usually it was whatever we had that season. Say it was 3 shows. It's like, okay, we have these 3 practice runs, and in 2-3 years when we do this again, we'll try to remember that and apply it. Whereas now it's like, hey, like all these weeks that we're dieting, they offer many previews in regards to how your body might respond to the fluctuating caloric intakes.
Mm.
Yeah, and Eric, you asked a little bit about the numbers. A lot of times, I just kind of will manipulate the macronutrients within the calories that we have planned for their high days. Because a lot of times when I'm planning a deficit for somebody, I'm thinking weekly deficit. If I want to lose a pound a week, I'm planning a 3,500 calorie per week deficit. And then I'll get my calories arranged on each day, depending on how many high days and low days I want. And then when we're practicing, I'll say, okay, well, normally, say the high day is 2,800 calories, and normally it's 65 grams of fat and 275 grams of carbs and, whatever protein, kind of mix it up. Let's keep the same caloric amount, but let's just go down a little bit in fat, give you a little bit more carbohydrate, kind of see what that looks like. And then, the next time that we have, our high day scheduled, or a double high day or whatever, let's play with it a little bit more, let's go a little bit lower in fat and get in a little bit more carbohydrate, and then maybe kind of start playing around with, okay, you know what, right, this will be something that we'll get into, but let's see, your blood pressure is pretty low, you feel like you're going to pass out after you tie your shoe, you get that vasovagal response, and it's just because you probably have chronically low blood pressure. So this time around, let's give you this much carbohydrate, this much fat. When you take your pictures, give me just a little bolus of some salt water, take a little half teaspoon of salt and dump it in your water, drink it down, get a pump up, and then take your pictures and let's see what things look like, because that will increase blood pressure, at least. What do they call that when it's very short-lived, like a transient, kind of short-lived effect? And let's see if we get anything out of that, But as far as the numbers go, I don't like to interfere with my fat loss that's going on. So I'll just kind of keep the same calories and mix and match the carbohydrate and the fat and maybe sometimes the protein just to maximize the carbs that we can get. See if we do see that silhouette look, a little bit more pronounced and the little lines be a little bit more defined compared to what we normally have been seeing.
That's really helpful, guys. So, I mean, I think the listener is now going to understand, okay, so the paradigm which we're operating under is that we have low days and high days, right? Which I think is an often unsung hero of the refeed protocols that we use. We've definitely talked about here and on other podcasts. Myself and Berto have been on to talk about this, that, we have these anecdotal experiences with, refeeding, diet breaks, and those are somewhat matched in some of the research findings we have, but we don't have any data on bodybuilders. We have, some data out of Bill Campbell's lab that suggests maybe there's some slightly better, muscle retention utilizing refeeds, even when total calories are matched, and relatively lean, pretty trained people. And then we have some data that Jackson Pios was a part of on diet breaks, where comparing same net total deficit but greater amount of time, where you're coming in and out of these every other week kind of setup or every third week setup of having a week in maintenance. And we don't see much of a physiological difference in terms of body comp, but we do see things that you think would improve adherence. So lower markers for hunger, greater diet acceptability, stuff like that. And that's, those are interesting pieces of the puzzle, and that's pretty important, the psychological side. And I really hope that in the future we can get this in more replicable or representative populations that are compared to bodybuilders. But anyway, anecdotally, it certainly seems to be something that improves the overall contest prep outcome. Could be down entirely to psychology, could be a mix of both. We don't know. But one benefit, like I was saying, that's kind of often not discussed when you're looking at it from a scientific lens, is that when you have the opportunity to go high in high in calories, you have the opportunity to go high in carbohydrate. And if, let's say, you have 3 or 2 refeed days in a week, you got 4 or 5 low days, you can also change the distribution of those days. So you could hey, let's, you report to me on Sundays. I want to see what that morning report looks like after we do a Friday, Saturday refeed this week instead of our normal, Monday and Thursday, which are your 2 lower body days or what have you. And we're also going to do it on a deload so that your overall output's a little bit lower. So you can stay within the confines of, like Brad was saying, the fat loss plan and not impede it when you're looking at it at a macro level at the total deficit over the week and still getting the job done, not messing with your cardio and your training or your overall energy balance too much, but getting those visual cues. And you can get an idea. And you don't even have to just wait till the report comes. One thing I would often do is, once I think we're within striking range of being lean enough to notice these details from peaking, is I would start to make those manipulations and be like, hey, send me pictures from the morning and the evening of each of the days that you're refeeding on, and then the morning and the evening after. Because sometimes there is a lag before you start to see these visual changes. And you might have the right numbers for someone to make them look good, but they look worse first and then look better. This is something that Cliff Wilson calls the load look,
Yeah.
Like, it takes some time for that glycogen to get where it needs to be. It takes some time for that water balance to renormalize, and that time course may be different for different people. So yeah, I think that's those are all things you can do, and then you don't have to sacrifice dieting weeks.